Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Mark stared at the picture on his desk. Him and Sarah 6 years back, wedding day smiles. Her smile, once his whole world, now felt like a painted lie hiding something ugly. He touched the glass, wondering when it all started to crack. Mark had built his design business from nothing in the city, working all the time. Sarah sold medicine. They met in college. Mark, the serious design student who never went out. Sarah, the lively business major who dragged him into the light. Their getting together was fast, exciting, maybe too fast, Mark now thought. Still working? Sarah asked from the doorway of his home office, a sharp edge in her voice. Mark looked up from the plans for fixing up the old downtown buildings, something that had taken over his life for months. Just finishing some changes. Big meeting tomorrow. Sarah leaned against the door, arms crossed. She wore the green silk shirt he'd bought her, the one she used to say wasn't her style until lately. We barely see each other anymore, Mark. When was the last time we ate dinner together? The irony wasn't lost on him. For weeks, Sarah had been the one coming home late, saying it was work dinners and team events. Her drug company, Nova, was supposedly changing things around, meaning more meetings and entertaining clients. I have that harbor project due next week, Mark replied. After that, I promise things will slow down. Sarah sighed, loud and dramatic. That's what you said about the hotel job last month. She walked into the room, her perfume smelling different, filling the air. I talked to Chris today. Mark's jaw tightened at the name. Chris was his old college roommate, the one who'd introduced him to Sarah at a party years ago. While Mark had built a respected business, Chris drifted between jobs, his family always bailing him out. How is he? Mark asked, not really caring. He got a big promotion at Ferris Drugs. Their main office is in Denver. Sarah sat on the edge of his desk. He said they're expanding their design department for a huge new building. He asked if you'd think about moving. Said the job would be perfect for you. Head of design, triple your pay. The intensity in her eyes caught Mark's attention. This wasn't just talking. This was planned. My business is here, Sarah. My clients, my team. You could start a division there. Think bigger, Mark. This is the chance you've been waiting for. We've talked about a fresh start for years. They hadn't, not really. But Mark didn't say that. I'll think about it, he said instead, turning back to his plans. Sarah touched his shoulder. Chris is flying in next Thursday. He wants to meet you. Mark looked up sharply. You already told him I was interested? I told him you'd hear him out, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. What's the harm in listening? That night, as Sarah slept beside him, Mark stared at the ceiling. Something felt wrong. Sarah had never cared much about his work before. She was always supportive but kept to her own career. Now, suddenly, she was setting up meetings and pushing for a huge move. His phone buzzed with a text from his business partner and best friend, Ben. Finished the harbor drawings. Something's off with the west side. Call me tomorrow. Ben was more than a partner, he was family. When Mark's parents died, Ben's family took him in. Ben had lent Mark the money to start their business when the banks wouldn't. Mark texted back, we'll call. Sarah pushing Denver move. Chris involved. Thoughts? Ben's reply came fast. Chris the snake. Hard pass. Since when does Sarah care about your career? Since when indeed? The harbor project filled Mark's days, but Sarah's sudden obsession with Denver filled his nights. She'd made a presentation with house listings, school info, even though they had no kids, and things to do there. Every evening brought a new reason why Denver was perfect. Chris says the outdoor life is amazing, she'd say happily over dinner. Hiking, skiing, all close by. Remember how we used to talk about being more active? Mark watched his wife. Her hair was newly highlighted. Her nails perfect. Little luxuries she used to think were a waste. She'd been working out harder too. Her body more toned than it had been in years. Chris seems to be really selling you on this, Mark said, keeping his voice even. Sarah's smile wavered a bit. He's just being helpful. He knows how talented you are. The day before Chris arrived, Mark met Ben at their usual diner for breakfast. They'd been going to Rosie's since they started their business, planning their futures over coffee and banana pancakes. Tell me more about this Denver thing, Ben said, stirring his coffee. Mark shrugged. Apparently, Chris's company is growing their design part. Sarah thinks it's perfect timing. Ben's eyes narrowed. And what does Sarah get out of this move? Her job is here. According to her, Nova has an office in Denver. She's already asked about a transfer. Mark, Ben said seriously, when was the last time you checked your bank statements? The question seemed out of nowhere. What do you mean? Just humor me. Pull up your accounts. Mark frowned but opened his banking app. Everything looks normal. What now? Check your credit card statements for the last 3 months. Mark scrolled through his transactions, then stopped cold. There were charges from hotels in the city, places he'd never been. Expensive restaurants on nights Sarah said she was working late. A jewelry store purchase from 2 weeks ago. I didn't buy any jewelry recently, Mark said quietly. Ben's expression softened. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this. Ben's wife, Nancy, saw Sarah with Chris at a fancy restaurant last month. They looked close. Nancy wasn't one for gossip. That doesn't make sense. Chris lives in Denver. Mark's mind raced. Apparently, he's been in the city a lot lately, setting up deals with local hospitals or something. The world seemed to tilt under Mark. The late nights, the new perfume, the sudden interest in Denver. It wasn't about his career at all. You think she's having an affair with Chris? Mark asked flatly. Ben didn't answer directly. I think you need to go into this meeting tomorrow with your eyes open, and maybe do some digging. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Mark sat in his dark office, laptop open to Sarah's email. They'd always known each other's passwords. No secrets, they promised. He hadn't checked her email in years. The proof was right there, hidden in plain sight. Emails between Sarah and Chris going back 8 months. Plans for secret meetings. Talk about how to convince Mark to move to Denver. Once we're there, we can figure out the next steps, Chris had written. It'll be easier when we're in the same city for good. I'll make him think it's his dream job, Sarah had replied. Mark trusts me completely. Mark closed the laptop, a cold anger building inside him. Yes, he had trusted her completely. That had been his mistake. Tomorrow he would meet with Chris, but not as the clueless husband they thought he was. The restaurant Sarah chose for the meeting with Chris was Montmartre, one of the city's fanciest French places. Mark arrived 15 minutes early, dressed perfectly in his best suit, hair just right. Image was everything today. Chris arrived 5 minutes later, still the smooth fake Mark remembered from college. Chris's handshake was firm, his smile practiced, his eyes sizing Mark up for weakness. Mark, looking good, man. Denver's the place for you. Chris clapped him on the shoulder like they were old buddies. Chris, it's been a while. Sarah arrived last, wearing a dress Mark had never seen. Her eyes flicked nervously between the two men, clearly looking for signs that Mark knew something. Sorry I'm late, traffic was awful. She kissed Mark's cheek, then gave Chris a smile that lingered too long. I ordered champagne, Chris announced. We're celebrating, right? Seems a bit early, Mark said coolly. The waiter brought the champagne, and Chris took charge of pouring. To new beginnings and old friends, he toasted. Mark raised his glass but didn't drink. Tell me about this job, Chris. It sounds almost too good to be true. For the next 40 minutes, Mark listened as Chris described the opportunity at Ferris Drugs. A vague leadership role with big promises but little real detail. The salary Chris mentioned was impressive, but Mark noticed he carefully avoided talking about who Mark would report to, how big his team would be, or what projects he'd actually work on. Sounds fascinating, Mark said when Chris finally finished. I'm especially interested in the campus design you mentioned. Who's the current architect? Chris blinked, clearly not expecting a technical question. We're in between firms at the moment. That's why we need someone like you to take charge. In between firms for $1 billion campus redesign? That's unusual. Sarah kicked Mark under the table, her smile tight. Mark's always been detail-oriented. It's what makes him so good at what he does. Actually, Mark continued, ignoring her warning, I took the liberty of calling Ferris Drugs this morning. Spoke with Diane Keller in HR. Chris's face went pale. Sarah's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. There must be some confusion, Chris stammered. The position is still being created. It's not public knowledge yet. Curious, because when I mentioned your name, Diane seemed confused about that too. Said you're not actually the regional director at Ferris. You're a mid-level sales rep being transferred to their Denver office next month. A sideways move, not a promotion. Sarah's eyes widened in shock as she turned to Chris. You said you were the regional director. Chris's smooth act broke. I'm being groomed for the position. It's complicated. Not as complicated as explaining to your wife why you've been in the city so often this past year, Mark said, his voice dangerously calm as he turned to Sarah. Or explaining to your husband why you've been meeting your college boyfriend at the hotel on Tuesday afternoons. The silence that fell over the table was heavy. Sarah's face was white as a ghost. Mark, I can explain, she began. I'm sure you can, Mark interrupted. You've both been very creative with your explanations. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. Enjoy your lunch. Consider the champagne my parting gift. As he walked away, he heard Sarah call his name. Her voice panicked. He didn't turn around. Instead, he nodded to the host on his way out, slipping him a $100 bill. The couple at table 12 will be getting their bill shortly. Please make sure it includes everything they order, no matter what they say. I will not be paying for it. Outside, Mark took a deep breath of the cool air. Phase 1 complete. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "It's Mark Lawson. We need to talk about Chris Palmer and his future at Ferris Drugs. I have information their board will find very interesting." Mark moved out that evening, taking only what he needed for a few days. He checked into a quiet hotel downtown, then turned off his phone as Sarah's calls and messages flooded in. 63 missed calls in the first 4 hours. She was clearly desperate. He'd expected anger, maybe denial, but not this frantic chasing. It told him she and Chris hadn't planned for things to go wrong. They were so sure of their lies. In his hotel room, Mark spread out his notes. After finding out about the affair, he'd spent nights looking into Chris's job at Ferris Drugs. The call to HR confirmed his suspicions, but he'd learned more. Chris hadn't been transferred to Denver by chance. He'd asked for the move months ago, setting their plan in motion. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ben stood in the hallway with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Figured you could use this," Ben said, stepping inside. "Nancy's worried about you." Mark managed a weak smile. "I'm fine. Like hell you are." Ben poured them each a drink. "But you will be. What's your next move?" Mark took the glass. "I'm meeting with Leo Ross tomorrow." Ben's eyebrows shot up. "The headhunter? Old Leo." "Chris isn't the only one with connections," Mark said, taking a sip. "Leo and I designed his lake house last year. He owes me a favor." The next morning, Mark met Leo at his office overlooking the park. Leo had built his company into the top recruiting firm for drug company executives. His client list included all the big players, including Ferris Drugs. "Mark, good to see you again." Leo greeted him warmly. "Though I'm surprised by your request. You looking to switch to the drug business?" Mark smiled. "Not exactly. I need information about Chris Palmer at Ferris Drugs." Leo's professional smile faded. "You know I can't discuss candidates or placements, even ones who are sleeping with your wife and trying to trick you into moving across the country based on lies." Leo's expression changed to genuine concern. "Ah, I see. That does change things. What do you want to know?" "Everything. His job, how he's doing, this transfer to Denver." Leo tapped his fingers on his desk. "Off the record, Palmer's not a great performer. He's been coasting on family connections. His uncle is on Ferris's board. He asked for the Denver transfer himself, saying it was for family. It's not a step up, more like a move to a less important area. His future there." Leo shrugged. "Limited. He's not well liked inside the company. The only reason he hasn't been fired is his family." He paused. "What are you planning, Mark?" "I'm considering a career change myself," Mark replied with a cold smile. "Tell me, who's the rival that Ferris fears most in the Denver market?" Leo's eyes narrowed. "That would be Meridian Pharmaceuticals. They've been aggressively growing, stealing Ferris's best people." "Does Meridian have any executive openings right now?" Leo leaned back. "As a matter of fact, they're looking for a new VP of Business Development. Someone who knows the competition and can help them target key accounts. Someone like a former Ferris sales rep with inside knowledge, theoretically." Leo studied Mark carefully. "But Palmer doesn't have the skills or talent for a role like that." "Meridian doesn't need to know that yet," Mark said. "All they need to know is that he has access to Ferris's client list and plans." Leo's expression was a mix of admiration and worry. "This is playing with fire, Mark. Sometimes a controlled burn is necessary to clear out the dead wood." Mark leaned forward. "I need you to set up an interview for Chris with Meridian. Make it seem like they headhunted him. Pump up his ego and make sure the pay package is too good to refuse." "And what's your endgame here?" Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Architectural reconfiguration. Some buildings need to be torn down before you can build new ones." As Mark left Leo's office, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't know. "It's Maya from Ben's office. He asked me to tell you that Sarah came by looking for you. She seemed desperate. Also, there's a Detective Reyes looking for you about the Palmer situation." Detective Reyes. That was unexpected. Mark made a mental note to call his lawyer, Patty Wells. Whatever Sarah and Chris were planning, he needed to be ready. Meanwhile, alongside his plan for Chris, Mark had set another plan in motion. His application for a temporary job with a design firm in Tokyo had been accepted. His flight was booked for next week, one way. The partnership agreement with Ben had rules for temporary absences. Ben would handle their city projects while Mark worked remotely. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time it was Ben. "Just got a call from Sarah. She's threatening to report you missing if you don't contact her in 24 hours. Also, Chris called the office looking for you." Sounded scared. Mark smiled grimly. "Good. They should be scared. The game was just starting." Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.